Hello, everyone. As the inaugural director of the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies at the University of Toronto, I welcome you to today's special lecture featuring Professor Richard Cohen of the University of Virginia. Professor Cohen will speak on the Chandayan identity in a Sufi vernacular Masnavi in medieval Sultanate India. The lecture is related to his recently published translation of the 14th century Sufi romance, the Chandayan, which is a masterpiece of translation and also multilingual texts with various images. And I highly recommend anyone who wants to do translation of classical text consult with this, because it establishes a new paradigm on how to put text together and translate. Professor Cohen's scholarship focuses on the successive languages to Sanskrit and the rise of literary vernacular languages such as Awadhi, the Eastern Old Hindi. These include interdisciplinary approaches involving historical linguistics, the rhetoric deployed in medieval Indian compositions, and the linking of painterly practices with text. Again, the Chandayan is a really great example of the linking of of texts and images. At the outset, and before Professor Cohen's presentation, I would like to express our collective and individual gratitude to Canada's Indigenous people and acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of Credit River. Today, this meeting place continues to be the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live, learn, and teach on their ancestral homeland. Professor Cohen.
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's an honor. If I get a chance to talk about the Chandayan, I grab the opportunity. The Chandayan actually means, the word Chandayan means the journey of Chanda, or you could say path of Chanda. And Chanda is a woman, princess, who ultimately becomes the desire of a man by the name of Lorik, and he pursues her, not knowing in the beginning who she really is. But because it's a Sufi text, and the implication is that there's an allegorical meaning here, that she is the creator in female form, in the beloved, in the form of the beloved. This is a typical, I would say, for at least the Chitya silsila, which flourished in India, still does in fact. This is the norm, because the idea of Chityas is with the Jew. An idea, of course, you would well meant familiar with the combination of realities, actually part of the creator. So in the end, the analysis would suggest that it's an allegory for the soul's journey towards divine realization. And Lord pursues Chanda, not knowing at first that this is going to be his experience. Now, the text is full of astrological references. Again, and probably for Persian literature is also very well known for this period. Chanda happens to be the moon in Sanskrit. So the vernaculars that come from Sanskrit adopt this meaning of Chandra in Sanskrit becomes Chanda, or Chand, or even Chand in the vernaculars. And Lorik is the sun, astrologically speaking. So the sun and the moon, obviously, in the sky will have a special relationship in mythology and in culture. Let me start why I decided to work on Chandra. So I'm interested in the boundaries of languages, dialects, and cultures, and subcultures. The history of an organized state usually involves and marks the homogenizing influence, even hegemony, of a single dialect. That dialect then becomes known as a language. But we can witness this process in the rise of modern standard Hindi, for example, during the latter part of the British colonial period, transitioning into the independent state of India. So it is the case of Urdu in Pakistan. The hegemony of such a dialect naturally empowers and raises it to language status. Chandayan manifests a cultural and linguistic transition that has been ignored for too long by historians of pre-modern Indian literature, particularly during the paradigm bending era of the Delhi Sultanate. Delhi Sultanate was in existence from 1206 to 1526. After 1526, established themselves in India. So here I'm mainly concerned with the transition, the domination of the literary classical languages such as Sanskrit and Persian to that of the dialects of North India during the decline and breakup of the Tughlaq regime based in Delhi, which was the last sultanate, in fact, in India. In the case of the Chandayan, it is the dialect of the Awadhi-speaking area east of the historic capital city, Delhi. Smaller, we're really only concerned with the northern part of the subcontinent, so maybe this is equal. So this is India around the 14th century, and the Awadhi-speaking area of India is the Jaunpur area here. Now, the poet of the Chandayan spoke this dialect of Awadhi, and obviously during his time, there was an oral version of this story practiced by a particular caste of cowherders, were called the Ahir. Now, we're pretty sure that the territory that the Chandayan was narrated in is not only here in Jaunpur, but extends all the way down here and over to here. It's a large area. And even today, and this is really amazing, even today, the oral version of the Chandayan, from which our poet drew the story in the 14th century, is still narrated in villages in that area, in different dialects, not just the Awadhi dialect. So why was the Chandayan neglected by scholars? India is a heterogeneous macrocosm of many communities, especially religious communities. Religious communalism lurks in the background in the modern era, even among scholars and the choices they make to do their research. During the 19th and 20th centuries, the Chandayan was neglected by Hindu and Muslim scholars for not representing their subject interests and respective identities. It wasn't until around the 1980s that the hegemony of Sanskrit studies in India and in the West began to fade after the rise of cultural studies in the academy. and scholars began to work on oral narratives and literary texts composed in North and Central Indian dialects. However, the Sufi dialect Masnavis, also called in India Premakyan. Premakyan means a romance, were hardly included in the overall study of Indian medieval dialect literature, but in fact, compartmentalized by scholarly circles. They often received more attention by the Western Academy than by the Indian scholars. In other words, Indian Muslim scholars and Indian Hindu scholars didn't see in the Chandayan something that represented their own identities. Because if this is a Sufi text, then I'm a Hindu, why would I necessarily be interested in it? And because it's in the dialect that is really Eastern Hindi, the Hindi scholar, the Hindu scholar would also stay away from the study of this text. So it was ignored. The importance of this book, given the state of politics in India today. More than ever, an open discussion of the heterogeneous histories of India's cultures and languages is the need of the day. The historiography of the Indian medieval has been under severe attack ever since the rise of the Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP, in the 1990s and beyond. In fact, huge sections of the history of medieval India, even including the Mughal history, have been excised as India's educational system is controlled by the federal government right now. So a close look at the society reflected in the Chandayan brings a much needed sobering clarity to what it was like to live in North India around 1400 CE. So how did this project evolve and what were the challenges? I discovered the Chandayan by accident. And when I knew nothing of such texts, I was drawn by an overwhelming curiosity engendered by the orthography of the illustrated manuscripts. By the way, there are 7 manuscripts of the Chandayan extant, and 5 of those 7 are illustrated, painted, which I'm going to show you some examples. Then there's one text in Nagri, which is this script of Sanskrit. Early on, my wife, Meher Afshan Farooq, offered encouragement by helping me to understand the orthographic and metrical mechanics of the 7 known manuscripts. As the book moved to completion, Meher read through the manuscript, especially helping me with suggestions for the introduction and, crucially, editing my translation, bringing her native speaker intuition and sense of good, effective translation style. So I really benefited. In fact, my translation today would not be the same as it is if it wasn't.
With that academic family.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Example.
Yeah. So time became my research aid as the internet became more powerful and museums loosened their grip on the illustrated manuscripts. However, access to downloadable manuscripts in high resolution was only a beginning. I soon discovered that the 3 most complete manuscripts were in jumbled states of conservation and need countless hours of editing work to reassemble the manuscripts into a coherent pagination. This actually took several years. The historical context. 1379 is the date of the text. It says so inside the text. So this is the Delhi Sultanate. It's the reign of Firuz Shah Tughlaq, originally from a Turkic family, Indo-Turk. And Firuz Shah reigned from 1351 to 1388 CE. And during his time, the Chishtiya Sufi sect was the most influential in the region of Delhi. During the Tughlaqs, also during Dowd's time. And the name of the poet, Chandayan, is Dowd. Later on, probably even after he no longer was alive, people started referring to him as he doesn't refer to himself in that way in his own text. He mentions himself a couple of times. Language of the text. So the poet Dowd's poem is composed in the Awadhi dialect, spoken here in Jaunpur area, of the time in the Awadhi dialect of the time, an Eastern dialect of the Hindi belt, and of note, the poem is the first instance of this dialect to be used in a formal literary text. Told his story, Chandayani. So it's Chandayan with an I at the end. As I said, it's basically the path of Chanda or the journey of Chanda. So as a Muslim, it is not surprising that Dawud generally follows the Persian Masnavi paradigm, such as that of Rumi or Nizami. However, there are no loanwords from Arabic or Persian, and the poem is rhetorically Indic in composition. Metrically speaking, the tropes and the metaphors and so on. Now, what do we know about the poet Dawud? Well, he does mention that he has a teacher, a sheikh. His name is Zainuddin Ali. Therefore, he's a disciple of the Sufi Chishtiya order. Sundan. Interestingly enough, he also said that he learned to write the Turki script from Zainuddin, from the sheikh. So does that suggest that he was illiterate? He was taught this Turki script? Or maybe another script and then the second one? Can't tell. I have a feeling that he was illiterate. And he also says that he wrote it in Turkey, but he sang a Hindu tale, based on a popular folk tale narrated by the Ahir caste, AHIR, of cowboys. Now, Dawud was probably a Hindu Ahir himself, converted to Islam by Zainuddin. This explains why Dawud was able to cobble together from the oral version, which he knew personally, may have even been a narrative. He was able to cobble together a literary text based upon characters and some of the stories, the secondary stories, the themes of the oral text, and made it into a literary text. Probably had help in that. Maybe Zainuddin, who was literate, was capable of being his editor, for example. This also would help us to understand why he does not infuse his text with vocabulary from Arabic or Persian, because he may not know it. Structure of the text. So Indian scholars have usually called this text a Masnavi, and it is a Masnavi in some senses. It begins in an Islamic style. Then you have praise before caliphs, and after that, then he begins to praise the Sultan, and then the Sultan's prime minister, and ultimately he praises the general of the fort right here with Dalmau, Dalmau. It's right on the Gunga River, and so Dawud is taking care of his relationships with powerful people. But I think in Persian, Masnavi is the poet. Um, to what extent would be up to the all of this. Sorry. Um, so stylistic influences. It's a Masnavi also because it's multi-meter. It has more than one kind of meter. It's almost two different types of meter, which are completely from early medieval Indian texts. Taking out of earlier context, the same kind of so-called tropai, which is a rhymed couplet, comprised of 2 times 16 morai, and the doha, rhymed couplet comprised of 2 times 24. Each canto, and I'm calling the chapters of the Chandayan, the 406 of them. I'm calling them cantos in my translation. And each canto is the same length, 5 couplets of chopais and 1 couplet of doha, making a total of 6 couplets. Each canto is having 6 couplets. So, also Dowd, I believe you could argue that he uses Rumi's approach to constructing his Masnavi in this way. First, there's the theme and the problem text. So he sets up the theme and the problem with a description of a kingdom called Dover. And it has a beautiful princess in the palace. And then the neighboring king desires the princess so much so that he wants to declare war on her father and grab her and take her away. Then there's a hero, Lorik, who is allegorically the son, is recruited by the princess's father to defeat this neighboring king. Then there's the complication. The hero meets the princess after being victorious in the war, and he falls in love with her at first sight. Later, he visits her in her dazzling palace of Bedford. And in the text, her palace is referred to as the White Palace. Translates as the White Palace. And it's pretty clear that this palace is quite pretty. Front cover of the book is constructed in this way. We have a balance here. This is the mundane world, blue sky. This is the White Palace. It's Tondo can be found. Now this painting here I put here because it describes how the princess Chanda is so beautiful that a man will immediately faint, fall in love with her. This is not the hero. This is before the hero meets her, and this is a minstrel who happened to be traveling through the princess's town, and he looked up at her palace window one day, and he saw her in the window, and he immediately fell in love. He fainted, and he woke up, and these men standing around him are asking him questions, are you okay? Happened to you, and so on. And he describes her. Then he also feels that if the princess's father finds out that he has seen her, that he's in trouble. So he leaves the town and he goes to a neighboring town. And this is that neighboring king who hears him describing her in a song. And he just by listening to the description of Chanda, he flustered them. Now, I must also say that along with my translation and an introductory chapter on the language and the text that I have written, there are three other contributors to this book. Naman Ahuja, senior scholar at Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi, JNU. He's an art historian. He's also the senior editor of the Mark Foundation, which is the publisher of this book. Qamar Adamjee is also an art historian, and she did a PhD on the paintings of the Chandayan manuscripts. So she was well suited for it as well. And Vivek Gupta is a recent PhD at SOAS in London, and he specializes in Islamic art. So he has, and also orthographies. He has contributed a chapter on the orthographies of the 7 manuscripts that exist. So back to the complication. So our hero visits her in her dazzling palace bedroom. I'll get to later, which they basically consummate sexually their relationship. So what do we have here? We have a romance in which both the male and the female are already married. And when they combine, it becomes an impetuous affair. That's not. That's a very interesting storyline. That's part of the complication. Then there's the hero's wife. The hero's wife is, of course, finding a way that he's now absent from home. Her name is Mina, and she suspects that Laura, her husband, is unfaithful to her. And ultimately, Mina and Chanda meet one another, and they have a fight. After the fight, the couple decides, Chanda and Laura decide to elope, because they can no longer stay in the city where everyone knows they're not fair. So they go on a they go on a journey, and what happens at the end. So the third section of the text, according to most of it, is the resolution of the story. So you have the theme and problem, complications, and then you have the resolution to the complications. So what happens in the end is that the hero returns home with his princess, and the three reside together. Lord, the hero, Chanda, the princess. Fortunately, none of the manuscripts contain the ending. But there are other Indian Sufi dialect romances that are written after this text, which many of them use this text as a parallel, that do have endings, and these texts usually have the hero and the heroine die. Sort of merge. So sources of the story. Dowd's frame story is based on an oral folk tale popular amongst the Hindu Adhir cow herding caste of India, as I've said, mainly located in the Hindi-speaking belt of central North India, encompassing the modern Indian states of Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and Chhattisgarh. Much of Dowd's plotline is taken from the main characters and events of the oral tale as it was constituted in the middle of the 14th century, with appropriate modifications to serve the purpose of his narrative. So the longevity, as I've said, the longevity of the oral narrative is impressive. As it is found at least into the 1960s, incorporated by these Akir Bharts. Now, fortunately, in the 1960s, an Indian scholar by the name of Shyam Bande extensively worked on collecting tape of the story. And he put them together in 3 volumes, and including the oral texts with introduction. And then later on in 2018, he came out with a critical edition of the text. That's the text that I have incorporated into the book. I got permission from his publisher. The oral tale validates the supremacy of the Ahir clan as a strong-willed, self-reliant, autonomous society in which men like Lorik epitomized Ahir manliness and virility while protecting their women and defending the right of the group to maintain their supremacy over land and cattle. And that is reflected definitely in doubt. There are 2 paradigmatic versions of the oral tale documented by Professor Pandit. One is called Chandayan, which is a variation of Chandayan, and the other is called Lorakayan, built on the name of the hero, Lorakayan. Now, I want to quote two scholars who, in what they're saying, really epitomize what Chandayan is about. The first scholar I want to briefly mention, it's actually a paraphrase from Bruce Lawrence, who many of you probably are aware of, that do. Right? And this is a foreword that he wrote for Paul Jackson, who has written the translations of Sharifuddin Nari's letters. Sharifuddin Nari lived in the 16th century in Bihar, east of Dowd. So he says this: the endless struggle which has been ordained for man, alone in the whole created order, is a personal struggle to seek perfection of the spirit while clinging to the pain of love. For the Sufi, it is an effort to combine the pain of love and separation from an unseeable, unreachable God with hope of assuaging such pain, achieving fana, the merging of the heart and God, suppressing the body's those emotions, nafs. End of quote. Now, this telling quote from Professor Pandey's book is also important to hear. Maulana Dowd was making a deliberate and conscious attempt to make a synthesis between 2 traditions. He was drawing his material from different sources to spread the message of love, masses, Hindu as well as Muslim. And then Pandey quotes Muhammad Jaisi, who's a author of the later Premakian Padmava. He's quoting him, saying, "Through love, man becomes divine." Essence of the philosophy of the I'll repeat. So, through love, a man becomes divine. Without love, he is just a handful of ashes. End of Muhammad Jaisi's book. Back to Pandey. This is the real essence of the philosophy of the Sufi poets in the Hindu dialects. And as long as humanity exists and the human values survive, nobody can deny the necessity of such ideals which make us better human beings, teach us of liberalism, broad-mindedness, and unity of existence on a profound level. So here you have, he recently passed away, but in 2018, he's writing this. And here you have a Hindu scholar in the middle of the BJP dominated India, who is pursuing opposite policies of love and liberality. Here he is writing this warning us, basically, of the necessity to study these texts. I was trying to write that. Five. Yes. Yeah. So if we can move over to paintings. so much, you can see the size of the book, it's impossible.
Yes.
So this is the book of a Sultanate. You can see that it was quite expansive. The practically encompassed all of the subcontinent at the time of Dowd. So these two paintings come at the very early part of the text before the actual story begins. And here's our poet extolling the virtues of the prime minister of the Sultan. His name is Jaume Shah. And the interesting point here made in this painting is that here's the prime minister at the top, and he's holding court. And in the middle, you have imams, clerics. On the left, debating religion, Brahmins, Hindu Brahmins on the right. And down below, you have a cow, which symbolizes Hinduism. You have well, in the text it says a lion, but I don't know whether it's a lion. And they're both drinking from the same fountain. Oh, okay. Now, the painter has clearly understood the original text, because it says the Creator has made a pillar for this earth, but for Khane Jahan, minister, it would be unstable. He places the people on his raft, pulls the rope with his hands, and brings them to the shore. This, of course, is a typical in the religious trope of a religious leader who brings, a disciple to the other side of the river or the ocean or lake or whatever to find God. He treats Hindus and Turks equally, speaking truthfully to both. Makes the cow and the lion walk the same path, making them drink from the same pond. Judges all with the same eye, never wavering, never uncertain. Just as Mount Meru is a mountain in the Himalayas that is a point of pilgrimage for Hindus, by the way. Just as Mount Meru stabilizes the earth, it is the axis for Hindu Buddhism. He stabilizes life in this world. Who is greater than the Khane Jahan? The Creator made him great. So there's no doubt here as to which side our poet is on. However, I don't believe that minister is his patron. His patron is mentioned later, but before I get to that, here are the 5 manuscripts that exist that are illustrated in different styles. And on the left top, you have perhaps one of the earliest manuscripts that date about 1500. In the middle, on the top, you have an older manuscript, along with the one on the far right. They go back to at least 1475. And then the bottom 2 show influences from Persian style. Later, they date to about 1520. So these manuscripts turn out to be very important for the development of early miniature painting styles. All of these manuscripts are pre-Mughal. We all, many of us realized that the Mughal style turned out to be the most important and influential expansive medieval painting style. This predates my effect. Now, in this page, I bring it up because our poet Dowd is at the top on the right. And he has his prayer reads text, I think says, oh. And there's Chanda sitting in her palace along with her nursemaid. And another interesting point that can be made is that in the 15th century, when the painting is done, that there is a distinction being made here between the elite princess who has golden colored skin and her maidservant who has dark skin. So there's a racialized sense here. Yeah. These are other texts that show the Nusk what Vivek Gupta is calling Naskati Divani script. But of course, it's adapted to the dialect. And at the top of all of the scripted manuscripts and their texts, there will be a Persian introduction here of the theme of this canto. So here you have your 6 lines, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All of these 5 are in the same meter, and the 6th one is a little longer in length. It sort of puts a capstone on the subject of the canto. But at the top, you have these headers, I guess you could call them, in Persian. And all manuscripts have these. They're different. They're not the same for Persian text. So I've transliterated it here. Third rose, Dolmadan, Irav, Bajir is the minstrel. Rav, Rasidam, the Kaifiyat, Surud, Shab. Morning, the Bajir is summoned by the Rai, that is this man who wages war on the princess's father. He fell in love with her by listening to the laws, right? So in the morning, the Bajir is summoned by the Rai, who asks him about the special nature of the song he was playing in the night. And we have to then assume here that these manuscripts that are illustrated have the Persian headers produced by patrons who are wealthy enough to educated would read these texts, or at least listen to the text recited in the dialect, but sort of catch the meaning from the Persian that introducing it.
Just one question. Did the earliest edition you said is 1475? Did
Yeah.
that have also
Yes.
Persian?
Yeah, it's this one. Right. There's a Persian head. It's badly damaged, but it's there. And notably, it's in red ink as opposed to, of course, there's red here in the middle of it too, and at the bottom. So these are 5 chopais. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the dolma. Same on the left, but this is a different manuscript. Again, the Persian. When you see it in the book, you read it. Resolution here is not good. So what we learned, and this is a different manuscript, and this one we follow.
Or the Atlo itself?
This manuscript is from about 1520. This is an early one. This is of 1475. Now, the challenge for scholars like myself, or Meher, and those who try to scan these lines, is that the Perso-Arabic script that is being adapted here to the dialect doesn't have certain characters that can represent the retroflex phonemes of the dialect, or doesn't make a distinction between Qaf and Qaf. So it's just Qaf all the time. So when you're scanning and you're actually supposed to be read as Qaf, figure it out for yourself. When Meher was scanning these lines early on, we were talking about challenges of reading this thing. She characterized the script as spiky. But I think we can call it nuts or a variant of nuts. Nuts divine. Now there is one manuscript in Devanagari, and this is it here. So in the beginning, typically of an Indian manuscript in this orthography of Devanagari. Invocation to, in this case, the goddess Saraswati, Sri Saradayan and Namaha. Obeisance to goddess Saraswati. Saraswati is the goddess of literature. Then it begins and says, Nuska Chandayan. Nuska, meaning manuscript. Chandayan. Utka. Utka is a compendium of various texts together in one anthology, I guess. So that's what they described. And probably this manuscript was based on a Nusk version of the Chandayan, and this person is practicing transliterating from the Nusk to the Devanagari.
This is a later, what was the date?
This is 1616.
16.
It's dated as a follows. Then after the reference to the Chandayan, it says Maulana Daud, Dalmau. So that Dalmau is that city where it's on the Gunga, where he's from. Right at the town. So we've been there. It's a very small thing, but it has a garrison. That garrison during Sultanate times was connected with Delhi. So this is his other connection to the prime minister through this garrison town of Dalmau. Then it begins, Safati, Ghani. Let's see, let me bring up the original. There was our princess, and she's plucking a thorn. She's plucking a thorn out of her foot, which is a tropic theme in Sanskrit poetry, love poetry, when the woman who has feelings of love for a man who is nearby, right? She wants to waylay, stop. She stops herself and she makes believe that she has a thorn in her foot. To come over and help investigate and help her. Solving a flower bowl.
It's the Indian bend and snap version. Snap it drops something. Pick it up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Get to this part. So, of course, there are references to Hindu deities, because this, on the face of it, you read the poem, you come away and say, this is a Hindu folk tale. But there are no references to Islam at all in your text. But it's an allegory. And it's being taught by a sheikh, Qamar, to the Murids and the Khalifa. Strange, but this is what happens. So you have a temple scene, and you have to represent the Hindu deities, temple. This is Shiva, and this is the aniconic version of Shiva, which is composed of a lingam and a vagina lingam.
What's Shiva writing?
No, Shiva rides a bull,
Oh,
and that's appropriate for the opinion. He's also composed of many animals, because in Hindu mythology, Shiva is a form of Shiva, in many forms, is composed of all the animals of the creation.
you're interpreting.
I didn't know this version of my Shiva. I knew that it was a male god, but
Subtle difference between Shiva and Shiva.
Shiva. Okay, this is me.
Her name might not be the Sanskrit
Shiva.
Shiva?
Yes.
Yes.
Which is Persian.
Yes, that is Persian. Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's a short eye. Short eye, not a long. So, but then you have in another manuscript by a different painter, you have the god of the temple in blue, and he's not Shiva, he's Vishnu, the creator god, and Shiva is the destroyer god. So,
It's the same.
Hindu cosmology requires that time is circular, not linear. So the world is a time scale of the timeline that goes repeats itself, repeats itself, repeats itself. So it has to have a beginning and an end, but then it begins again. And Shiva's job, one of his jobs, is to destroy the cycle, and then Vishnu to start. So here is our poet. He does appear in the text, and he does paint it by some lead. There's an aside way into the text, 335th canto, 426, right? So here he is, and he says about himself, the poet Dowd sang the Chandayan, he who heard it swooned. Fortunate are those who recite it or copy. Fortunate are those who study the words and comment upon them. On her way to Haripatan, Princess Chanda was bitten by a snake, and I have described it here. There was a curse involved, and she was bitten. She survived it. Then I thought, let me sing this song so that the people can hear it. Oh, Nathan Malik, exalt this account of suffering. Give an ear and listen to this excellent story. Bowing my head and joining my hands together, how much shall I beg you, Nathan Malik? Listen to each and every phrase. Give me your opinion. I'll recite after weighing it in my heart. So here is not Nathan Malik. So who is this fellow? I'm proud to say that I'm the first scholar to figure out who this Nathan is. Nathan Malik is the chamberlain of the Sultan in Delhi. The job of the chamberlain is to control the access to the Sultan. It's like a chief of staff in the White House. So he knew this.
So according to this conclusion, you must be the most fortunate of all for gathering, translating,
Yeah, I hope so.
publishing multilingual.
I hope so. But then we of course we have the hum. And the original's on the right in Omidyar. Perle gaon Sirjan Haru, Jina Sarajia Des Diaru. Sarajasi Bharati or Agasu, Sarajasi Mer Mandur Abilasu, Sarajasi Chand, Suraj, Ujiyara, Sarajasi Sasarab, Nakat Himara. What is happening here is that this is the first canto, praying God, the Creator, but his name for his reference of God here is this word, Tirjan Al. Doesn't use Allah, he doesn't use Quran. Tirjan Al, which is an Indic word, which literally means creator. So, and the verb to create is sarajasi. He creates, he creates, he creates, he creates. So first I sing of the Creator who made this and all of the lands, made the earth and sky, the mountains, Meru, Mandar, and Kailash. These are three mountains of pilgrimage for Hindus in the Himalayas. Made the moon and the sun radiant, heavens, the necklace of stars, the cool shade in sunlight. Verily he created its form and beauty. Made the clouds, the wind, the darkness, flashing lightning. The entire world is his creation, and I have described it in one song. Joyful are my heart. Five cantos is on this way. Then he gets to the nut, which I won't, from five cantos. Then he gets to the nut of Muhammad in one canto. Has only one canto about the right one to find it. Okay. So on and so on. So after 17 of these introductory cantos. Then we get into the story. And I show you this painting because this is an example of the society and the cultural life and material culture of India of the time that is that the story contains. So we learned a lot from the story of material culture of the time, the cuisines that are made, the food that is made, the textiles, the saris that women wore, and the weapons of war. Just a mine of information in the Chandayan about society. And this is a painting of Dowd reciting the Chandayan to this man. This is a monastery, a lake with Hindu yogis praying, washing themselves in the water. So this is daily life at that time, and it's certainly not an Islamic, not a portrayal of Islamic society. It's the portrayal. I think we probably have some questions.
Well, thank you very much. Extraordinary, really amazing. Great.
That there is no ending to the story. So I was wondering the physicality of this manuscript that you examined. Do they all end at one certain point, or each one end in different points?
One ends. There's only one manuscript that brings us as far as we can. 426 chapters.
So then it means that the author didn't just let this story open unended. So it means that the author didn't intend to have this story open-ended. It had.
No.
It's a missing.
According to report the style of these kinds of romances, which we know about after Dowd's text is taken up later by poets, and they use the Chandayan as a paradigm, the story of discovery of God through pursuing God in the form of a woman. And in those stories, most of them, the hero and the heroine die because they actually achieve phenomenon in merging with God. God is the prince in this story, or is all of us. It's humanity. He represents humanity and the princess, the creator. And one can assume that it ended problems. But we'd love to have.
Thank you for this awesome talk. It shows that India is a treasure trove of everything.
Yeah.
You can find new texts that you've never heard of. And thank you for introducing these texts. My question is pertaining to the point that you just raised. What makes this text particularly Sufi, given the fact that there was, as you said, there was no mention of Sufi terminology in it? Aside from the allegory of God and this and that, what makes it Sufi in particular?
Question. Well, there are a number of Sufi silsilas this time century existed in the New Age, continue to exist today. Look at the Chishtiya. And all of the Premakyans, all of the Sufi Premakyans that we know of are for the purpose of getting an allegorical description, just like in Chandayan. There's the everyday world, and there's a different world reflecting the everyday world. Both are reflecting. Also, we know from the text that Dowd is a Murid, Zainuddin, Sheikh Zainuddin. And Zainuddin is a Chishtiya Sheikh. And it's this Sheikh who taught him how to write Turki. And the native language of the Sheikh is Abadi, the same language. They share that. even though both of them are sitting in Delhi, which is not a place where that dialect actually spoken to the east of them.
So it had a particular audience, therefore. If it was written in a dialect that was in.
Right. Probably the first time that the Chandayan was publicly recited from this story would have been in Dalma, small garrison town on the Ganga, where Omidyar is the island. And, the connection with Delhi, of course, is with the Sheikh, and he must have traveled there, sat down with him, and see what I've done. And the Sheikh said, "This is wonderful. Let's recite it here in the Khanqah, place where the Sheikh lived." But there would be people in the audience, and that would have a mixed linguistic composition, right? There would be people speaking the dialect of Delhi, dialects north of Delhi, Punjab, then east of Delhi, south of Delhi. So they have it. But these are dialects that are related, have a similar vocabulary. Words might be pronounced differently. Verbal composition might be slightly different, but they can understand. But obviously, 150 years later, with these illustrated manuscripts, some of the patrons were more comfortable with having the Persian top. But I understand that in Persian literature, you do the same thing. The whole text is in Persian. They'll have some summary of the canto or the chapter at the top of the Masnavi. Is there this?
That's
Yeah. So see, they're following that. All right.
But that is my question, in a sense that, thank you very much, first of all, for the outstanding presentation. I learned a great deal. The deep structure of Chandayan, as you described it, you argued that it's based on Masnavi, theme, computation, and resolution, and then also a text that the earliest edition are in Persian Arabic Urdu, Persian Arabic script, and not in Nagari. So indicates, and first of all, that the Rumi's mode of composition had become hegemonic in rapidly in a place that was probably in the periphery of the Islamic influence. And this is sort of remains a deep question for me, that how could Maulana Dawud, who was illiterate, be so educated that was familiar with the cutting edge of Persian literary tradition and producing something in totally different culture that has resemblance and has thematic similarities and that kind of sort of rapidity of influence for me is sort of a question. And also that how the Persian Arabic editions precedes the Devanagari editions. That's also an interesting question.
Well, if Dowd was a Hindu but converted to Islam, is illiterate, his source of writing, source of grammar and sense of grammar and literary styling would have been his shape. And now whether Zainuddin knew Persian or not, I don't know, but he was resident in Delhi. And of course, Persian was the administrative language of the Sultanate. And historians tell me, including people like the traveler Ibn Battuta, he lived in Delhi for 10 years, or at least 7 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
And he writes about Delhi. And apparently Delhi in the 14th century was the cosmopolis of the Islamic world. I mean, this is not a hinterland place, as far as the Islamic world is concerned.
Yeah.
So maybe one thing I think that moderns we don't appreciate is the way that people were able to communicate with one another in ancient times.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about 1000 AD, 3000 BC. I do work on connection between the Middle East Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley civilization, which dates back to trading.
Right. And then trading, but the depth of sort of familiarity with this
Yes.
model paradigm, it's sort of puzzling for me. And actually, in the modern period, you don't see that kind of rapid impact and influence. But here you see, it's a good question. But here's another related to this,
Okay.
is that we are accustomed to think of all literary production as single author.
Yes. Yes.
Given the oral origin, would it be possible to entertain the possibility of multiple authorship and maybe Maulana Dawud was the final copy editor of it, and not sort of the compiler of the
Well, in fact, I mean, that is the history of the classics of Indian literature period. Bharat, great.
Yeah.
Epic, 100,000 couplets, right? Supposed to have an author, his name is Vyasa. What does Vyasa mean in Sanskrit? Editor. Means, so obviously he didn't write. To all the great texts of Indian literature, multiple, authored by multiple. And you're right. I think that we have to be open to speculating, at least, that Dowd himself, and by saying that Dowd was a converted one is not something that earlier scholars said. They assumed that he wasn't from birth. Right. I don't think so. Especially when he says that Zainuddin taught him how to write. Not only that, he says Zainuddin taught him the power of language. He actually uses that phrase. And I took that knowledge and I wrote a Hinduki song. He calls it a song. He doesn't call it a story. Song. So and he says I sang it. But what is an author of a written text singing for? Of course, you can write them and sing it, but I think he was singing it before the oral version, before he even translated. Yeah. Of course, it's much reduced now in songs.
First of all, thank you very much for
Yes.
this wonderful talk. And thank you, Professor Tawakkoli, and your team for this opportunity. So you mentioned that based on the Indian mythology, there's a cycle in the sense that there is a creation and then destroy. So it's not a kind of linear. There's a kind of, so what is the reason behind this kind of
This
Yeah.
Understanding of the universe. I do work. I teach a course. It's called Classics of Indian Literature, and we start with the Vedas. The Vedas date to 1200 BC, roughly. Beginning of Indian literature. The Vedas are written in Vedic Sanskrit. Sanskrit is an Indo-European language, just Persian. So we have this continuity, I guess, between early form Hinduism, because the Vedas are stories about sky, the earth, stars, nature. Hinduism is a religion that is based on nature and an understanding that we are all part of that. So even though Hinduism has been labeled as a polytheism, the religion of many gods and goddesses and so on. In actuality, when you dig below the surface in the Vedic literature, there is this concept of Brahman. Brahman is a neuter noun. It's not a feminine or a masculine thing. So early Indian thinkers had the ability to conceive of the creation, creator of the creation, as some kind of formless spirit that is responsible. And so for them, it's an unending universe as far as temporality. And the way to deal with, daily life, they'll come and they go, it's birth and death, that yes, it's there, but it's cyclical. So this arises with the idea of reincarnation. First, reincarnated on acts that you create that you did in the previous life. So that's the karma theory. After the Vedas, you have the Upanishads, which are the first philosophical texts of Indian literature, and they really get down to the questions. Who is this creator, and where is it? And slowly, as the Upanishads emerge, then theism begins to creep in, and anthropomorphism of these deities. So Shiva becomes a man, Vishnu is a man, whereas in the Vedas, Shiva doesn't even exist. His name doesn't. He's not a concept in the Vedas. Vishnu is the creator, and he's appropriately called Vishnu. Sanskrit Vishnu means creator. So Vishnu is represented in art with a blue skin. Always think of Vishnu and his incarnations, which are 10, in the blue color. Now, why? My students ask me, why is Vishnu blue? Blue sky. Look up at the sky. You've seen 1/4 skin. 1/4. That's the analogy. So this is how. So the early Indians were able to conceive of a gigantic being, and I think Indians early on came up with this notion shunya. Is the existence just emptiness? And ultimately that turns into this concept of zero. Debate about that. Beta the zero, and then they come up with the decimal system. This is then imported into the Middle East, and the Europeans take it from the Arabs, and they go with the Arabs.
Thank you much. The next question is from Dr. Pegah Shahbaz, who is a Persian Indian scholar, a scholar of Persian Indian.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Professor Tawakkoli. Thank you very much, Professor Cohen, for your intriguing talk. I look forward to reading your translation very soon. I ordered it online on Amazon while I was listening to you. I will have a question, and I will also have a comment. Regarding the question, my question is somewhat related to what Professor Tawakkoli asked a few minutes ago. To what extent do you see the element of intertextuality in the plot of this narrative? And did you notice the usage of, Jain tales or Buddhist tales somewhat in the form of allegory inside the narrative or not?
I'm so happy that you raised this question. But as a teacher of Indian literature, this is one of the bothersome things. In the United States, or in the academy in general, at the University of Virginia, in the English, take a course on background and one. I have to teach 3,000 years of Indian literature for 40 years, starting with the Vedas. But in doing so, I am able to bring to the students' attention the intertextuality of these texts, because the old sort of trope that nothing is new, right? It's just rehashed ideas that slightly different forms that make the poets stand on that particular literature. But Indian literature, you take, for example, the Mahabharata. Mahabharata, in fact, people argue it isn't in the Mahabharata. So the Mahabharata is this huge collection of stories within stories within stories, which of course the Buddhists and the Jains invented this embossing technique of storytelling even before and later on this Tao is. So Tao even refers to Hindu stories like the Ramayana in the Mahabharata, in the Chandayan. He invokes Rama's name. So there you have it. Nothing is lost in the history of Indian literature. Just keeps being, it's a well. It's intertextuality. It's definitely in the Chandayan. But it's Indic text.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have just a short comment. This text has already been integrated into Persian literature of South Asia. We already have traces of an early translation of this text in the 15th century by a Sufi of Chishtiya order, Abdul Quddus. We have only a few couplets of it available. Article about it. I'll share it in the chat box. You can check it. And apart from that, we have even other versions of it that were produced in centuries afterwards. We have Mina Lorek, produced by Hamid Kalanuri for the Mughal Emperor Jahangir in the 17th century. And there is also another version in prose, which is called Zib Esmat. It was produced for...
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Yeah. So Persian literature has its own versions and variations of this tales, which are also worthy to be studied comparatively. I read Alamgee's version, and it's more focused on the pain that Mina goes through in separation from Lorek, the legitimate wife of the hero of the story, rather than Chanda. And it's a rather, let's say, Islamized version, let's say.
It's an interesting thing, that whole literary phenomenon to the awareness and the borrowing going on. Here it's in the opposite direction. The story of Mina so Mina is the wife of the hero Laura, who was left behind. So this is also a favorite topic of three other texts, two in Awadhi, one in Awadhi, one in Dakkani, which is a dialect of central India, which the origin of Urdu comes from Dakkani. And the third one is in Bengali, medieval form of Bengali. So for some reason, after the Chandayan became famous, it also sort of became infamous once certain people felt bad about Mina's being left behind by Lord in the story and the way she was treated. So these poets come along and tell her side of the story. And one of them is very interesting because in Mina Sat, that's the name of the adaptation of the Chandayan, Mina Sat means truthful. So here you have the truthfulness of the jilted wife. There's been his fidelity was unquestioned. In Mina Sat, she is married to Lorik. Lorik is a businessman, he's not a warrior. And he tells her one day, I have to go on a business trip for a year. And so take care of yourself. What's the subtext? He leaves. A man whose name is Sultan, actually, right? How it works. Sultan desires Mina. So he sends a gardener woman to convince her that she needs to meet this man. She resists, and she resists, and she resists. Finally, she says to this woman, you know, I've been suffering my business spouse is away for a year. And she goes through the 12 months of the year. And she complains about how she's feeling during those 12 months. This is the trope in the literature. Bara Masa. Bara means 12, Masa means month. So this minus is actually a Bara Masa. And there's a Bara Masa, there are two Bara Masas in the Chandayan itself. There's a Sarafa. Sarafa is a Persian device to describe the female body and to separate. And this is where this neighboring king who wants to, kidnap Chanda falls in love with her because the minstrel has been singing about her, and then he brings him to his palace. He says, "Okay, be more specific." And he does this. And I'm talking about every inch of her body is described. And in Sanskrit poetry, it's the reverse. It's a nakshik, not between the toenail. So Sanskrit poets started the toenail and go to the head. Persian poets started the head and go to the feet.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I want to ask about the intertextuality of the text as well. If you could like elaborate on whether besides these rhetoric, the trope.
Wait, excuse me, I have a hearing aid that I need to adjust. Okay.
So whether you could elaborate on the intertextuality between like this Masnavi and, for example, like Sanskrit romances, whether they are like any samples, or whether you can identify the specific sources that the author relied on, maybe if it's possible.
Resources that I rely.
No, the authors of the Masnavi.
Yeah.
Other
Well-
than Mahabharata and Ramayana and other sources, whether you can locate like any specific ones from the Sanskrit.
No, that's a good question, but in fact, I think we have to believe and assume that doubt was community that possesses this oral tale. Some members of that community are professional narrators, and I'm willing to go far enough to say that either he heard many times this Chanayani or Chandayani in his time recited before him so many times that he was able to memorize the basic plot, or he himself was one of these professional narrators. And then he his area called Dalma was appropriated by the Sultanate in Delhi, and a garrison was established there with a Iqtidar. The Iqtidar is a province. Iqtidar is the commander. So he had a garrison, and probably Bao was here in that area. And before this Iqtidar was established as the ruler, the local ruler, there was a Nahir king. The Ahirs were in control of Dalma before it became an Islamicized town. Well, maybe that's why Dal was converted. Not in Delhi, but in Dalma. So this tale is already part of it. Not relying upon a study of some other source.
Like I to the text.
No, but he's aware of the Roman. He's aware of the like he doesn't quote these texts, but
Like other vernaculars at the time. For example, are there any similar texts in Raj Bhasha, for example, or in other vernaculars, west to Delphi, or in other parts of the Indian? Or is it unique in a sense? Like the unique attempt to synthesize these two traditions.
Right. So as a literary dialect, already precedes Rajak. So Raj Bhasha went about so not to say that Raj doesn't eclipse Ovidya at some point, but this tradition of writing romances, representation of Sufi philosophy, is first. And of those texts, the Chandayan is the very first. So Dowd, whether he knew it or not, he was setting up a paradigm. Later poets, Sufi poets, to come along and In Braj, there are no Masnavis. This fight. It's only in Omidyar. But this is the empowerment of Omidyar dialect is so important because 16th century you have Tulsidas coming in. Tulsidas is the author of the Ramcharitmanas, which has become the Bible modern India, the Rama story. It's a Sanskrit version that goes all the way back to 200 AD by Valmiki, but people don't know that it's the Tulsidas. And so basically, scholars would suggest that without doubt, we wouldn't have a Tulsidas if we didn't have a Tao first. One is that Muslim, one is the
Professor Cohen,
Yeah.
thank you very much for your outstanding presentation, which has been a reminder
yeah.
to all of us in Persian and Iranian studies to overcome our wall and bordered account of Iranian studies and look beyond the territories of Iran for interaction, literary interaction
Yeah.
between India, Iran, Central Asia, Iran, Persian,
We need
and
that.
all that. And it's so important
Yeah.
that you have brought this to us and we take the warning very seriously.
But I have to say that we Indianists have walled ourselves in as well.
Yeah.
Although we do have we have a scholar at several scholars at UVA who bridged the gap between the Persian and Sanskrit.
Well, as Donald Trump gets busy building walls around the United States, let us academics bring down the walls that separate our regional studies.
That's right.
Thank you again.